I'm dissatisfied with a lot of the recent game and film theories, and the latest FNaF film theory demonstrates one of the longest running problems I've had. Now, I want to make it clear. My problem isn't, oh, we can't have robot kids in this. The problem is that this version of the theory continues to have the everlasting problem of not trying to actually adapt Silverize or any of its plotline. And while I find that the Gregory robot theories have an even worse version of this problem, I find this film theory's bizarre integration of the concept just a little bit more notable than usual, because you can easily integrate the robot kid concept into the movie in a much more direct way that is a lot more spot on to how Silverize handled it all. It's like the one time I could see a plausible robot person theory, and when it's presented, it's not the way that makes sense. So rather than just try to say, I don't like this, I want to explain what I would like. If we're going to do robot kid theories, I want to see a good one. Now, as usual, I like to lay out ground rules for interpreting a theory and topic. I want to eliminate a lot of things that game theory, film theory, and other channels have used for robot kid theories frequently that just completely ignore the context they were originally presented in. Firstly, anything that is quote-unquote robotic behavior. Greg's robotic head tilt from GGY. Not only is this a trope in media in general and not a robot thing, but not only do I not remember Charlie ever doing this, even though I'm sure she probably did this, because like I said, it's a trope, but she's never noted as doing something so robotic and analytical the way this point is built on. She's not T-800, she acts like a person does. CharlieBot also bleeds, eats, she sees the illusions from the illusion discs the same as everyone else. And I want to emphasize this again, she bleeds. They're also pretty within human limitations of physical capabilities. They aren't like Jenny from A Teenage Robot, they don't have superpowers or anything like that. Only really Baby has this property, and she's heavily modified, so who knows if that even counts as like inherent features of the CharlieBots. The fundamental concept of the android plotline in the Silverize trilogy is that she is so seamless it's like she never died in the first place. The only time I feel like there's an element that points to, oh, only a robot could handle this, would be the fact that she survives having the Ella doll taken out of her. Obviously humans don't have little dolls inside of them, but the equivalent injury of that should kill someone. So if there's any differences that would be indicators of what a robot person is, it would be that they could survive something that normal humans couldn't. This is largely unrelated, but I thought I'd just point out that Vanessa does bleed even though film theory states that she doesn't. More importantly than even just the physical stuff, which like I said is often ignored for the, oh, robotic head tilts, oh, the vision getting corrupted. More important than any of that is the fact that almost no one tries to actually adapt the storyline this comes from. One of the fundamental elements is how Henry was so desperate to have Charlie back, and he poured such his heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into making her, that even though it's disgusting from a moral concept to resurrect the dead like this, it was a love and passion project. Part of what makes Charlie alive is that emotion and effort and true care that went into making her. Yes, Henry is a genius in robotics, and that does play a part in it to some extent. But what makes William unable to comprehend it in the novels and unable to truly recreate it is he can't understand genuinely caring about someone that much. He does not have the required love and empathy to go into it. And you can't just say, oh, then the roles are reversed in this context. William is just a loving person. Not only is that not supported by what we see in the actual games, with Henry clearly displaying that he still very much cares about Charlie, which means they aren't morally switched, with William being the empathetic one, and he tries to kill Vanessa in the actual movie. And that's not to say you can't interpret William with having some empathy or emotions. I'm just saying he isn't like novel Henry is, and that is a fundamental crutch of this original story and dynamic that Robot Kids comes from. The point of that story in many ways was that William could not make robot people. And there is very much a case you could make that if William in any of these continuities could just make robot people, would he even do any of the things he does? What's the point of experimenting with Remnant if he already has the technology or capability to make someone like Gregory as a robot? Doesn't he just kind of win? Obviously, he can't work for something if he finished said work. So if we're going to borrow from the storyline where robot people exist at all, should we not also borrow from that William and Henry? Why take only the literal physical robots and not any of the story they were attached to? And you know, if you're taking the physical concept of Robot Kids only, it's really annoying if you ignore all of the rules of how physically Robot Kids work. And I know you could invent a narrative or version of the story where William is empathetic, that he does care, but at that point, why are we borrowing from the William who didn't care? That's the William in the story where Robot Kids exist, and we're not taking from him. We're just taking the concept he didn't even invent himself. and then we're saying he did it. Why would Scott take only the robot person plotline from the novels and nothing else attached to it? If you were going to claim that these are physical properties of robot kids, and you were going to say William is a type of character who would want to make them, then you're not really taking from the novels. You're taking only the surface level concept from the novels. We're not even borrowing the rules or emotions or themes or context of it all. And if you cannot understand why I think this makes theories worse already, I'm going to give you the example of what would make this all better. What I want a theory built around the idea of taking the robot kid concept to look like. Mike's plotline borrows a lot from novel Charlie's story. They both have a missing sibling who is killed by William, and they're obsessed with trying to figure out what happened to them. This plotline ultimately drags them to Freddy, and they spend a lot of their story figuring out how that sibling's disappearance connects to the other greater mysteries of Freddy. One of their parents kills themselves while the other runs off and leaves, not to mention they're both obviously the main characters. And they also have huge, really alarming gaps of knowledge when it comes to Freddy's, even though they really should know a lot about it. While Charlie's is more like selective traumatized amnesia with how it's initially presented, Mike just straight up has no memories of Freddy's, period, despite living in an area where it's very prominent and close enough to drive to on a night-to-night basis. Though I wonder if for the movie they likely did this for exposition reasons to make it so Vanessa can explain things to him, rather than Charlie having internal monologues in the novel to try and catch us up to snuff a bit. And as stated by film theory, there's all connections between Mike's family and the Henry family from the original novels, especially with the car imagery and the first missing kid who dismantles the whole family. Both of their stories are set after Freddy's is already closed, with William Afton under pseudonym being an authority figure that ultimately gets springlocked at the end of the movie. And those are just elements of Mike and Charlie's stories overlapping. There's plenty of times the movie just clearly borrows an idea from the novels. In fact, the entire concept of a drawing igniting the memories of the animatronics so they can attack William is just right out of the fourth closet. But of course, in the novels, the big reveal is that Charlie in the novels was the one who was kidnapped and killed, and Henry rebuilt her as a Charlie box to try and hide from the fact that she was killed, a sort of way of deluding himself. And we could easily say this is what happened with Garrett. He is the movie's counterpart to Sammy. Not only does his storyline match almost beat for beat with Sammy's, but even the photo connection lines up. Shut it past me, your future self has some insight. See, I wrote this script in section completely convinced that there was a photo of Mike and his family when Garrett was still alive, like a family picture. I don't know if my brain made this up or not, but if this photo does exist in the movie or anywhere, this next section exists for it. If it doesn't exist, you can just skip past it. Having a photo with your family and the missing kid that ultimately is revealed to not actually be missing or never have existed at all is a direct connection to Silver Eyes. This photo is real but staged. Garrett, in quotes, or what Mike believes to be Garrett, is actually a kid who did go missing. That kid would be recreated as the first stage in the Mike-bot line. The Mike that's in the photo with Garrett, in quotes, is the next stage in the Charlie bot line, just paired up with the other one. This could be a way of convincing Mike that this really did happen, that he never died. This was the whole point of Charlie's missing memories in the novels in many regards, so she wouldn't question her own history, to think that she really did survive and there was nothing wrong. Future me here again. If it doesn't exist, then we have no reason to believe that Mike and Garrett ever existed at the same time. There's no physical proof. The only narrator saying so is Mike himself. So if Mike was a robot recreation of Garrett, in quotes, then William kills the then at the time only child of the Schmidt family. Years passed, meets Mike, sees the last name Schmidt, looks at him closely like, kinda looks like, that can't be. And then has Vanessa go in to get questions and figure out who this guy is. After this scene in the river, Afton thinks there's this older brother running around that he missed and is a loose end to tie up. Another interesting connection between Mike and Charlie is the fact that while Mike does bleed, he survives like an amount of wounds that doesn't fully make sense. Like I said at the start, the actual difference between robot people and normal humans is that they can survive things that normal humans would not normally be able to survive. If Garrett is our Sammy right now, in other words, a fake or misdirect missing kid, with the actual missing kid being Mike, then narratively either we're going one of two routes. Or at least as far as I can say. I don't want to give the fallacy that there's only two options. We're going to have Mike-bot and Mike/Garrett as the puppet as two separate characters, which really wouldn't be how Silver Eyes worked, or the games worked. That also kind of betrays part of the themes that this original story comes from, that Henry, despite wanting Charlie to come back so much, can't bring her back. She's just gone. So I feel like if they want to hit that same emotional wavelength, having Mike/Garrett just be dead and there be no way to bring him back would be the more logical way to adapt the story. And then you can kind of conclude Mike's character with learning that, hey, even if I'm not Garrett/the Mike that I thought I was looking for, and even if I'm not a normal human in the way that everyone else is, I'm still a person. I'm more human in some ways than William is. You can make that comparison. That it's his empathy and emotions that make him real. But of course, the puppet's a huge popular character, so we can't just have the route of no puppet in the movies, really. But there is a way to not contradict that theming while still having the puppet in there. It just requires it to not be Garrett or Mike. There are genuinely good connections between Garrett and the puppet, but I think there might be subverting our expectations with this storyline in general, but especially with Henry's character. We know from this river scene that Miss Schmidt killed herself sometime after Abby was born. And if this is some sort of remix of the Henry family in the novels, what if Miss Schmidt in this timeline is our Henry counterpart for the novels and games? Well, much more so the novels. I mean, Mike's already a different gender than Charlie, who he borrows from a lot, so there's precedent for this already. And this would line up with novel Henry's family. At first, when she loses her kid, she wants to have him back immediately, have a just complete robot recreation. And that works for a time, but eventually she breaks, being dissatisfied with it. And when she has the next biological kid, and it isn't a boy to recreate Garrett and Mike effectively, she completely snaps and kills herself. The Schmidt family dad vanishes just like novel Charlie's did, unable to handle the robot kid, and in this case, the newborn child. And while it's really sad and messed up, this would allow him to connect with Abby on a very personal level in a unique way that only this story could. They are basically both sad, failed attempts to try and hide from Garrett/young Mike's death. And they are both failures at it. I could easily see this storyline having a scene where Abby's like, am I really your sister if you're a robot? And then he would say that say, hey, we're both failed attempts to hide from Garrett. Aren't we siblings in that regard? Or something like that. And one of the most promising potential candidates for this whole Mom Henry storyline and potentially her being the puppet is what we'll call song theory. See, kind of unused in the movie is the missing children's report, which were in the teasers and trailers for this, so I'm going to assume this is still canon to this version? Maybe? At least we don't have any reason to believe this isn't true, but those scenes show that the missing children's incident in the movie version is in 1987, which is interesting because in every other continuity, as far as we know, it's in 1985. What's even more interesting about that is that directly lines up with the FNaF 1 Living Tombstone song, which is used in the credits. Assuming the FNaF 2 song, It's Been So Long by Living Tombstone, will be in the FNaF Movie 2's credits, we have a song that's all about a mom being devastated by the loss of her son and ultimately becomes the puppet, which given how possession works in this series, would mean killing yourself or knowing that she's going to die soon. And if she's going to become the puppet, well, I mean, she's going to become the puppet, which could be a very apt and interesting swerve for the whole plotline. This allows her to fulfill Game Henry's plotline and Happiest Day without being the game version of Charlie. Much like Game Henry, she, as the puppet, will be the one orchestrating the fire to burn everyone down and release them all, and to allow her to complete Henry's character arc. It also allows Mike to be reunited with his mom and get some closure there. It would allow for her to apologize to Mike for effectively creating him and Abby and then abandoning them when they weren't what she wanted. Could you imagine Mom Puppet, before burning herself and all the animatronics to let everyone move on, being like, I'm proud of both of you, even if you weren't what I wanted. Or like, you were what I needed, but not what I wanted, or something like that. Does that not sound cinematic and final for this kind of character arc? In many ways, it's what Game Henry ends up on. It also lines up with something that Abby says at the end of the first movie, specifically how the animatronics and kids now have no one to watch over them or guide them. That could segue into any puppet, but it being a mom fostering a generation of kids, specifically a mom who lost her kid to Afton, would be very narratively satisfying. Hell, I think this theory works even without the robot Mike in this video. I do want to make some things clear though before I end this video. I do not believe Mike is a robot in the movies currently, but I do think it's a completely plausible, legitimate theory with what's being given. But more importantly, as you could tell from the first half of this video, I am not trying to say with this video that we should have more robot kid theories, they just have to be tied to the books, or that theories should be tied to the books in general more often. My point is, if we're going to try and borrow ideas from the books, should we not consider the context they come with? And if they don't fit the context they come with, we shouldn't use these points at all. I don't want the same problems with Gregory to manifest with Garrett. I want to show in this video that it's not a problem with robot kids. That's a huge stigma right now, is it's robot kids are the problem. Matpat should stop talking about robot kids. FNaF should stop talking about robot kids. Books, never can talk about the books. That's not the problem. To me, it's much more a problem with the fundamental theorizing philosophy at play here. A lot of times with the novels and books, it's an idea being grabbed only on a surface level. One of the main concepts behind the Chica was a character who was like in her own band or a restaurant and then taken into the main band and bought out, is taken from Puppet Carver, in which the character in question that's being referenced as the Henry parallel does not have his characters get bought out and purchased into a franchise, like what's being suggested in the theory, and also has very little in common, if anything, with Henry other than being an inventor. Or how his inventions didn't work. That's like one of the main points. Or at least it didn't work when it was actually being presented to anyone. Also, while I'm on the topic of Chica being from her own restaurant, the goddamn FNaF cookbook says she's one of the original animatronics. I can't make this up. I haven't gotten the cookbook, so I don't know how reliable it is for lore, but I just find the concept that the cookbook could debunk one of Matpat's thoughts just fundamentally hilarious. It's this kind of cherry picking where you take one idea and don't flesh out the connections behind it that makes it feel frustrating and shallow. If any surface level idea was fair game for theorizing, then couldn't anyone make any claim for any point because there's so many ideas that have been tossed around in these books at this point? For connections to the books to have weight, they should feel like they're lining up with characters, like Mike in this video. He has several plot beats that directly overlap with Charlie's. When you put them all together, it doesn't sound absurd that he could be revealed to be a robot like Charlie was in the novels. But this random idea skimming, like the loose idea of a humanoid robot from the novels, is not very convincing. Though, just in case this wasn't obvious enough, I say none of this with any ill intent towards Matpat or the theorist team, or anyone who likes robot kid theories or believes the recent game and film theories. I say all this because it looks to me like there's a problem, and it's a problem I think can be worked on and improved if attention is brought to it and it's explained in a better way than just, I hate this! And clearly just trying to make debunk videos isn't really helping. I hope this different kind of video could shake things up a bit. With all that said, bye.